No more boring battlefields. Today I'm going to show you how to build the ultimate modular hills that look awesome, work with any game, and are easy to make. I'll teach you simple foam carving techniques and how to paint effective looking rocks easily. Let's get crafting. The material I will use for these hills is XPS extruded polystyrene. You could use regular polystyrene instead, but it will result in your hills and rocks having the distinctive bubbly texture. Firstly, I quickly sketch rough irregular shapes onto the foam, taking care to have a variety of shapes and sizes. Using a sharp kitchen knife, I repeatedly stab along the lines. I'm working with both 50mm and 25mm thick sheets of foam so that I have a variety of heights. There's no need to cut all the way through, a rough fault line of small cuts will do. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually quite hard work. My arm is on fire. Who needs to go to the gym? Just build terrain. You can then take out your frustration on the foam. And now I have a massive pile of potential. Texturing time. Some of these pieces already have somewhat of a rocky cliff face looking texture, but others will need a bit more work. Using the kitchen knife, I cut into the foam close to the edge and snapped chunks off. Working at an angle and varying the depths of the cuts is a simple way of creating the look of layered rock. You could skip straight to the aluminium foil ball stage, but with a little bit more effort we can make these look even better. Lightly tapping the knife into the foam, following the angle of the cuts from the previous step, adds more of a crumbly stone look. I vary the depth and concentration of these cuts to create different textures. I want the tops and bottoms to be flat for easy gameplay, and I also want to be able to stack them for serious verticality. After all, having height on a battlefield leads to some fun tactical decisions.
I have the high ground!
But we still want those flat surfaces to look interesting, so I cut cracks into the flat surfaces. Be sure to vary the amount of cracks on each piece, some with lots of cracks, others with a few, and some with none at all. Connect these cracks where you would expect a natural break in the rock. These can be accentuated by cutting deeper into the foam. I like to use a sharp piece of slate to press into the cracks. This helps break up unnatural looking straight lines. To create more variation and realism, I run the blade parallel to the top and break chips of foam off. Doing this at a variety of depths works really well for the look of a fragmented rock face. Cutting at a shallow angle to slice a thin strip like this and then flicking the blade up to break off the foam can make flat surfaces look like cracked layers of rock. Now foam does tend to get these bendy bits which really spoil the look of rock, so make sure to pick them off. And finally, using a ball of aluminium foil, I press a rough stone texture into the foam all over. As always, varying the concentration will help sell the realism. And be sure to stick around to the end of this video where I'll reveal a very special feature of these modular hills. Now that the rocky hill pieces are all textured, it's time for painting. I start by using a mix of watered down matte Mod Podge and grey house paint. This is painted liberally all over the foam, taking care to work it into all the nooks and crannies. I apply this in 2 coats to ensure a solid covering. While the second coat is still wet, I sprinkle them with tile grout. I mostly use a light grey grout, and for some variation I also sprinkled on patches of dark brown. This was worked roughly into the wet paint to add a gritty, rough texture. It also creates a natural looking base colour once dry. This is really messy though, and it is essential to wear gloves and a mask because grout is nasty stuff. If you don't want to mess around with grout, you can skip this step altogether and just work with paint. But it is important to add some colour, because real rocks are not just grey. So you can simply add messy blotches of burnt sienna, raw umber and yellow ochre to the base grey. The dry brush stage will then blend it all together. Before dry brushing however, I'll give them all a nice wash. For this I mix ink with water. I'll be using sepia ink and black ink washes and apply them both in various concentrations all over. You could do this step after dry brushing for a more muted finish. I worked through the whole lot of them in batches and stacked the finished pieces on an old wine rack to dry. Okay, now we can move to dry brushing. I start with a heavy dry brush of light grey all over, concentrating more heavily on areas that I want to be lighter. To highlight raised edges and certain interesting looking textures, I apply a light dry brush of white. As you'll see in the final reveal, this project will result in a whole table worth of hills and mountains of significant height, and it's only cost about $30. Still, these videos take a lot of time, so a massive thank you to all of my patrons for making this possible. Now you could leave them as they are because they already look great and would work really well for a barren or mountainous location. But I want to elevate them to the next level. So it's about flocking time we added some colour. I'll be sticking with yellowish and olive greens and the odd sprinkle of dark earth coloured flocks. I used watered down PVA and then sprinkled the flock in patches. I make sure there is good coverage all over the top of each piece before tapping off the excess. Having a tray underneath is a good idea so you don't waste any of it. I do love how much life some flock breathes into a project like this. Once I'm sure the glue is set, I seal the flock firmly in place with a thorough spray of matte sealant. Now this is probably the most costly component of this build, so make sure you use my cheap DIY alternative to the expensive commercial stuff. Once that's completely dry, I spray Rustoleum matte varnish all over each piece for an extra level of protection. The Mod Podge paint covering should protect the foam from melting, but it's always good practice to try a test piece first. And now we can try some different layouts. These hills are so versatile and with countless possible variations. From scattered hills, a wide valley, or even a mighty mountain feature. And adding scattered terrain like trees and shrubs elevates them to the next level. But what's truly awesome about these hills is there's more than meets the eye. The double-sided. Having one side grassy and the other barren and rocky adds even more versatility to these hills. This rocky look is perfect for a sci-fi desert biome for a game like Star Wars Legion or 40k. The added benefit of having texture on both sides mean they grip well and so don't move around annoyingly in gameplay. They're also super easy to store because of how they stack. If you'd like to see how I make awesome looky rocky outcrops and a whole forest board, then check out these videos. Please do hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. And I'll see you next time at 3D Games. Until then, good hobbying everyone.